Hello, everybody. Welcome to Uncommon Analysis. Today, I want to take a few minutes to speak about the false hope, if you will, that much of the left wing and Trump derangement syndrome blogosphere latched onto and argued early in election night. For those of you who didn't follow or watch a lot of these folks' live streams, I spent the last good bit of last week watching these supposed pundits and bloggers or whatever they call themselves, YouTube folks, influencers on the left, and their election night quote unquote coverage. And I sat through it so you don't have to. And I'm not even going to play a single clip of them because it's just painful. It's horrifically painful. I feel about 20 IQ points dumber for having watched these people. These people are people like Pac-Man, like Vosh, like the Majority Report, like the Bulk Ward. These people were just full of insanity and delusions of just reality on election night, especially early on. And a lot of it came from, well, they just didn't understand politics. And honest to God, most of them I don't think have a clue about politics. Some of them do have a clue, but are in complete denial. Other ones just don't have a clue at all about fundamentals, or they're very bad at math, or maybe a combination of them both. I go into by election night. Anyone who's getting honest information and actually looking at the fundamental information should have known and should have been easily able to tell you that the odds that Kamala Harris could have won that election were insanely slim. There was only one path, one remotely realistic path, and it was insanely slim that she would be able to pull that off. Anyone telling you that this was going to cakewalk election for Kamala, she was going to win it comfortably, she was going to win by a landslide, anyone feeding you any of that information is either a liar or a flat out idiot. I'm sorry, they were. Okay, they okay, maybe it's a bit strong. They were fools. How about that? They didn't bother to fact check or look at the information that was actually out there because the writing was on the wall. And I have a very long video where I go into intimate detail of why the writing was on the wall that Harris was going to lose that election and lose it most likely in a big way to Donald Trump. And I'll link it in the comments below, and I'll put a little link here if it shows up in the video as well. But anyway, I digress. The purpose of this video is not to rehash that, but more so to say where did this opium early in the night when the numbers were starting to come in, and the numbers, in the beginning of the night, they weren't horrible for Harris. They weren't great, but they weren't horrible because just the nature of how elections work. But it was fairly obvious fairly early on to anybody who understood election politics that Harris was in deep doo-doo. Okay, the odds of her winning, the numbers were not there for her. They weren't there. I came home 8:30ish, settled in, had a little food, settled in for the night, and started watching the election results. And I can tell you by 9:30, anyone who understood Pennsylvania politics should have been worried if they supported Kamala Harris. Okay? By 9:30, just looking at the 10:30, it was blaringly obvious that Kamala Harris was in not likely to win Pennsylvania. It was almost impossible by 10:30. The writing was on the wall. There was no coming back. Trump was getting 20+% out of Philadelphia County alone. That alone should have told any pundit, any analyst worth their salt that she was in massive trouble. The odds of her winning the state were just about gone. It wasn't statistically gone by that point, but anybody who understands how Pennsylvania works could have told you this is over. Now, I believe it was another hour or so, maybe more, before some of the the mainstream media finally called Pennsylvania for Trump. But I'm telling you right now, anyone who understood politics and understood Pennsylvania in particular knew the race was over by 10:30. Okay, at the latest. It was blindingly obvious she was in a bad way by 9:30. Okay, but these people had hopium. Where did this hopium come from? Right, as these numbers were coming in, and and it was pretty obvious she wasn't doing well. She was not performing the way she needed to do to win. They kept holding on these false hopes, And they kept citing things like, oh, where this fault, citing reasons and justification. Largely, where this false hope came from was some very early exit polling released by NBC News at about 5 o'clock, 5ish, give or take, 5:30 maybe. I don't remember exactly because I was working, so I'm going by video after the fact. But around that time, the first exit polls from NBC News came out, and they told the story, and they told the story pretty accurately. Honestly, they were left leaning because early exit polls almost always are left leaning. So there were some things in them that definitely could have given some hope, but an honest assessment would have said this is not something that should be giving Kamala supporters a big size of relief. And I want to go through here's the actual broadcast report of NBC. And honestly, they do a fairly good job in some aspects pointing out the flaws in these numbers, but at the same time then ignore it, giving false hope. And this is the false hope that showed itself in Vosh and Pac-Man and Minority Report and Bulkord and others, right? They clung to this a couple hours later, clung to it when it was glaringly obvious the numbers weren't going their way. They hadn't clung to hope. Oh, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. Refusing to accept reality until way, way, way too late. So let's go through these early polling numbers and what was reported. Here we are, beginning of the night. First exit polls are coming in.
We've been talking about a lot of specific issues. You and I have spent a lot of time this year talking about inflation and the importance of that. And there's no doubt it's been a real drag on President Biden's job rating. It's been sort of the wind at President Trump's sails. But if it's not the top issue, that means there's something else that they went into that voting booth. And, look, state of democracy you got to be careful here.
Now, this is the most important thing he's going to say. He says it right here. State of democracy, pay attention to what he says.
Because it's a subjective, I think.
Well, it
it's
cuts both ways.
It can cut both ways.
I mean, it's the Democrats and Republicans both have different visions of what that means to them.
I really want to.
Exactly. Okay. That's your tell right there. That's your tell. If you're a Republican, you could be just as worried about the state of democracy as a Democrat. And that could have been your motivating factor to go into that polling booth. As a Democrat, oh my God, Trump's a fascist. You buy into the left-wing nonsense. Trump's a fascist. Trump's a Nazi. Trump's going to destroy the country. If you're a conservative or Republican, Kamala Harris is going to destroy the country. Look at the last 4 years. They've destroyed the economy. They've wrecked foreign policy. They've completely destroyed the border, right? We can't afford 4 more years of this. We have to vote her out to save. We can't put her in there. We have to save our very democracy in our country and our existence as a nation, as a state. So they're telling the truth here. At this moment, they're telling the truth. But watch what happens a few minutes later. Okay, so now we're going to get into it. Here the numbers come in. Now we've got the numbers.
Numbers in now on the most important issue. Look at that in bright pink there. 36% of voters say the most important issue to them is the state of democracy, not the economy as the top issue. That is right there at number 2 at 30%, the economy. Abortion, 14%, followed by immigration. Chuck?
Okay, now that alone ought to tell you right there the insanity, right? But we'll get back to that.
Immigration's where? Think about it. Just take a step back here. Okay, look at those top 4 issues again. We know.
Here he is. He's going to ignore what he just said a few minutes ago. It's only a few minutes later.
Know what the number 1 and number 2 issues have been for Donald Trump this election season?
The economy and immigration.
Correct. Add that together. Okay, add up together state of democracy and abortion. It's just, I'm being a little simplistic here, but already, if this, and again, one of the things that I want to warn people is that there has been a tradition in these exit polls
I was just going to say, you're doing it. That's right.
The first wave skews a little left.
And sometimes the top issue can become the second top issue.
And it has happened to us in previous elections.
Right.
So we absolutely want to, these are little grains of salt we want to give you
That's
here.
right. We're not overreading into it, but we do want to tell you what we know as we're
directionally, if this is what this electorate is saying, you would be, and the Harris campaign will be ecstatic.
They just said, you just heard him say, state of democracy cuts both ways. Yet, he says, add these two together and you get a bigger number than these two, which is true, right? 50% is larger than 41%. However, state of democracy cuts both ways. Let's just say it's 2-1. Say 2-1. Say 2-1 Harris in the state of democracy. 2/3 of this are Harris voters worried about Trump getting in office, and 1/3 are Trump voters worried about Harris getting in office and using this as their reasoning for it. So that would divide that number actually right nicely, 12% to 24. 24 plus 14 is what? 38%. 41 plus 12, 53%. 53% to 38%. I can Yet this was a good indication for Harris. They ignored what they just said. Now I understand seeing anything other than the economy and immigration at the top of the ballot at the top is a hopium moment for the left. I get it because they literally ran a campaign on nothing. Orange man bad and abortion. That was their campaign. That was it. So showing anything other than this or this on top is going to be, oh, great. But it ignores fundamentals. It ignores so many fundamentals. They just said it. The idea this is only going to be a benefit for Harris is nonsense. And I gave it 2 to 1. 2 to 1. If you go 2 to 1, if it breaks two to one, Harris, she's at 38% versus 53%. Okay? Does that sound like a winning situation, Harris? No, it does not. Let's do it even. Let's say it's even. It's even worse. If you go right down the middle, 18-18, that means what? Harris is at 32% and Trump's at like 40, 59%. That's a blowout. This is not good for Harris. Sure, it's better than nothing, I guess, and that's what they did. They gave them hope with this nonsense. Let's go to the next one. And again, these numbers are the first wave, and they just admitted they tend to skew left. And here's going to see your obvious proof they skew left. This very next moment. Watch.
Another exit poll we want to go to right now. Who do you trust more to handle the economy?
Now, this ought to tell you right here that's a garbage. This ought to tell you it's skewed left right here. You think Kamala Harris scores 47% trusting on the economy versus Donald Trump? There's only a 4-point swing there. You're insane. You're absolutely insane. This is the proof that the numbers are skewed and skewed badly. And you're going to hear him admit it. You're going to hear him talk about it. Here we go.
51% Donald Trump and 4% behind Kamala Harris. This is not surprising. Trump closed on the economy. He also closed on immigration. Chuck, your take on this?
But you know, it is a little surprising.
I think the gap,
Exactly.
it's a very narrow gap.
Should be farther,
yeah,
right?
Donald Trump had been leading on this pretty heavily.
8 to 12 points in many of our, when we would say who'd be better for the economy. She didn't have to win this issue. She just couldn't get clobbered on this issue. Again.
Early data.
But wow, that's not an insignificant.
And again, this is the first data we're getting. So
they are conditionalizing it. They are conditionalizing it. But the left punditry, blogosphere, ignored those conditionalizations. He just told you when they polled on that number, Trump's up 8 to 12 points consistently. Yet here their exit poll is showing him at half that, at 1/3 of half that. That's evidence all you need. Yes, early voting can be different than pre-polling, no doubt. But did you think there was a 50%, a 4 to 8 point swing? No, that's insanity. And they do call it out, but the left ignored it. So as you can see, this is where the hopium came from. This is where the numbers came from, because they started talking about, oh, the exit polls show this and that, when the reality was kicking them in the face. They refused to accept it. So if you watch those folks, this is where the hopium came from. I give these guys credit for the most part. The one thing where they fell down hard was when they pointed out that breakdown was just nowhere near reality. So as you can see, you want to know where the hopium came from? This is where the hopium came from. They didn't exactly lie to them, but they clung to these early exit polls, which turned out to be bogus, and they should have known they were bogus, because if no other reason, 4 points on the economy, garbage. All right, everybody, hope you have a great day. I am out.